So against Penn State, Ohio State pulled out an offensive line of Donovan Jackson at left tackle, Carson Hinsman at left guard, Seth McLaughlin at center, Tegra Shabola at right guard, and Josh Fryer at right tackle. That center to right tackle spot has been the same all year long. Obviously, a series of injuries to Joshua Simmons and Sid Maholski put Ohio State in a position where it had to take left guard Donovan Jackson and move him out to left tackle. We saw Luke Montgomery come in an emergency situation against Nebraska. We saw Carson Hinsman start against Penn State. We've also seen Austin Saravelt start a couple games at left guard when Donovan Jackson was out. Andrew, when you listen to the numerous questions Ryan Day was getting about Carson Hinsman, about Donovan Jackson, about the offensive line as a whole, about Tegra Shabola as well, who was the only offensive lineman who did not grade out as a champion. Ryan Day said he was close, but the grades are the grades. They're not here to, kind of cater to anybody's feelings. Are you expecting this, regardless of what happens with Zim Maholski, whether he's out for the year or maybe he makes a return? Are you expecting that five to be Ohio State starting five for the rest of the season?
Well, firstly, let me just say that was the best Ryan Day press conference I've ever seen because there were so many offensive line questions. I was so happy the entire time. We're talking about offensive linemen. We're talking about different rotations. We're talking about different guys playing with each other. Loved it. Loved that part of the press conference. So more offensive line talk. Yes, I think that is Ohio State's offensive line moving forward because I think when you listen to what Ryan Day said about Carson Hinsman and the experience playing a big factor as to why he played left guard, he had said, I felt validated personally because he had said what kind of we had said for a couple of months of basically just Carson Hinsman probably just played a year too early. Like if Luke Whippler was here last year, Carson Hinsman learns under him. You learned under a guy who's going to the NFL. You learn under a player who has seen a lot, who has played in a lot of games. And then Carson Hinsman probably takes over at center this year. And maybe you're not looking at Seth McLaughlin in the transfer portal. Maybe there's a lot of different ways you could look at that. But the experience matters. And Carson Hinsman playing at left guard, it is a luxury to be able to pull people off the bench that have game experience. Carson Hinsman was their starting center at Notre Dame last year. He was their starting center at Michigan last year. He was the starting center against Penn State. Now, granted, that was a home game, but he's played in loud environments. He's played in big environments. He's played in big moments. He's played in moments where the offensive line has had to just say, we have to win this play or we will not win the game. I'm thinking about the Notre Dame game specifically. Like, having that guy come off the bench is a really, really big benefit for Ohio State. So I don't think you go away from that. I think he played well enough to prove that you shouldn't go away from that. So the experience matters. I think he played well enough in that regard. I think you just stick with what you got because, again, the offensive line that you had with Josh Simmons, where Jackson was at left guard, that was an offensive line that had a lot of experience and it was building chemistry together. And that's very, very important on the offensive line. So I wouldn't go away from this five. I think what you got right now is what you're going to see through the rest of the year, injuries notwithstanding. And I think that as you go through these final four games here, I think there's reason to be optimistic. Cautiously optimistic is probably the way that I would say about this offensive line because they did play pretty well against Penn State, but they're going to have to prove it each and every week down the stretch.
They said they were counting on that experience, and that's why they went with Carson Hinsman. That's just the environment that can be Penn State. When you've played at Notre Dame, when you've played at Michigan, you've seen some variation of that. And so Ryan Day said they were counting on that with Carson Hinsman, and they got that, especially with some of the silent count stuff where they gave that responsibility to Carson Hinsman now that Donovan Jackson was playing left tackle. You expecting any changes? Maybe can Austin Saravelt make some things interesting here? Can Luke Montgomery make some things interesting here?
Yeah, I think it's funny because we're leaving this Penn State game and going into it, we had no idea what the left side was going to look like. And now I'm like, I think Carson's fine at left guard because not only did you wanted the experience from the sense of like false starts and holding and things of that nature. I thought he just played well in general. Like as an offensive lineman, he played well to the point where I don't know why you would change that going into this week. It's really the right guard spot that if there is a change, that's where I could see it maybe happening. And it's interesting because you mentioned Tegra Shabola didn't grade out a champion. He was the only offensive lineman who wasn't one of the offensive players of the game. But at the same time, Ryan Day just reaffirmed that Tegra Shabola is this team's starting right guard. Tegra Shabola has started every game for Ohio State at right guard. He split reps with Saravelt. Some of the reps I think that he split were also due to injuries because he went down in the Oregon game. I think he went down in the Nebraska game as well for a little bit. If Austin Saravelt can make a push and be more consistent, maybe behind closed doors and earn some more reps, I think right guard is still up for the grabs. It just seems like Austin's maybe not making that push right now, so Tegra is the best option there. So if there is a change moving forward, I think right guard is probably the one spot that I would have circled and say that's most likely to happen. But based on what we've seen, it doesn't seem like that's going to happen. So I think this is going to be the starting 5 moving forward. If there's a change, I think it would be at right guard.
I think it's their starting unit because they don't really have any other options. Seriously.
Well, it would be Sierreveld. Like, Sierreveld would be the option, I think, and that's kind of all you got. I mean, because if Michalski's going to be healthy, then did he show you anything against Nebraska that he should play?
Ryan Day said if Zen Michalski's available, they're basically still keeping Donovan Jackson at left tackle.
So you get Michalski and then you get Sierreveld, and those are your only 2 other guys who have really played. I mean, like, Josh Padilla's there, but do you feel great about him? Luke Montgomery hasn't really played on the offensive line. He's played in a Bison role. So, like, you have options, but those are just options right now. They're not. You're not looking at. There's not a Carson Hinsman coming off the bench anymore. There's not a guy who you can say he has a year of starting experience or he's played in 10+ games and he's played in all these moments. That is gone now.
I don't know if I agree with what Ryan Day's explanation was with Carson Hinsman, but I understand where they were coming from. It felt like they were essentially trying to get back the year of development that they lost because Luke Whipple went pro. So essentially, Seth McLaughlin was brought in here to be the starting center, but he was also brought in here to mentor Carson Hinsman, which is why instead of, especially once he went through the sickness in fall camp, instead of trying to put him in a right guard battle, just make him the backup center. Let him learn behind Seth McLaughlin for a year, then let's start this conversation over again in the spring. And then obviously things start to happen, and so you have to make different decisions. And it's part of the reason why Austin Sierreveld was the guy who got to start the season, is because Carson Hinsman is your backup center. You want him to learn behind Seth McLaughlin. Then when guys start getting hurt, you got to rethink your math a little bit. I don't think they have any more options. I asked about the backup tackles at this point because you have to, right? You've lost 2 tackles. So you got to know what's next. If something happens to Donovan Jackson, if something happens to Josh Fryer. And the 2 guys who are up next, George Fitzpatrick, who has been the backup right tackle, is now the backup left tackle, at least on the depth chart. Ian Moore, true freshman, high ceiling, high potential future starter, has gone from a 3 to the backup right tackle in this situation now. And so I asked just, hey, where are they if you get into another emergency situation? And Ryan Day did the most. They're doing well, but it was very much like, yeah, they're not ready to play football.
They're battling. He loves the word battle when he talks about offensive linemen.
Yeah, they're battling, and they're not ready to play football. So this is it. Like this is what you have now. This is your 5. And it looked pretty good against Penn State, and it's going to need to continue to grow. The good thing is Purdue's got 2 guys who can at least be a good test without real consequence for you, so it's a chance to continue to grow. You got to continue to grow the rest of this year. But also, they literally cannot afford to lose another offensive lineman. They cannot afford to do it because they just don't. The options are no longer on the table. And this is not because of recruiting or development at this point. This is just simply because, look, bro, once you're on your 3s, you're not really expecting much. I don't care how well you've developed your offensive line. If you're putting 3rd stringers out there because you have your left guard is playing left tackle. You're out of options at this point. So I think we're all, to your point, Andrew, cautiously optimistic based off of what we saw against Penn State. But we also know this is probably it. They can't afford to lose anybody else because this group has to continue to keep growing and get better and better by week, but also can't afford any more injuries. We'll continue to talk about this on Buckeye Talk, so go listen to that wherever you find podcasts. Andrew, Steven, Stefan, get the text 614-350-3315. 2-week free trial, $3.99 after that. See ya.